we're not getting is, DOC, what are you doing? What can we expect? And that's the question that's not being answered from the state down, because until we know that, how can we go respond? That's,
Yeah, and I think what Brandon said hits that right on the nail head.
and I'm not sure how that impacts Corey's work, the way the DOC's handling prisoners, puts them on the street.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some unexpected results from sentencing where we thought someone was going away for a longer period of time. We've also seen some people go to DOC programming and flunk out and go to prison. So it depends on the individual. But as a whole, DOC is in a weird, turbulent time right now. Their policies are changing on a lot of things. And so there's no way we can predict this coming year what those jail levels are gonna be at. Well, I could say that. I think the estimate that they're putting at, what are you guys putting at, 20, 23 or 25? What are you putting at?
Well, they go through so fast anymore. We're working on a little bit more concrete numbers, which hopefully we'll have that maybe to you guys maybe the next week or so here. But like today, there's 37 total inmates in our jail. 9 of those are Broadwater counties. 1 is Park County, 1 is Teton. That's a warrant, so they're just waiting to come pick him up. 1 Marr County. Actually, take that back. There's 2 Marr County. 1 of them we share with them charges. 7 Lewis and Clark County. Talked to Sheriff Leo Dutton. He's looking at fall of 2019, and we won't see another Lewis and Clark County inmate. And then 17 Department of Correction inmates, 1 MSP, so Montana State Prison. So I think with the numbers, that we projected, was 34, 35.
Yeah, I think we started at 27, you guys increased it to 34,
It went up.
memory serves?
And it's now we're at 17 Department of Corrections. We've been down to 8 Department of Corrections inmates even in the past few months since December 31st.
What was the low number?
8.
8.
So, I mean, they're taking van loads of inmates to the prison, which we've never seen that before. I mean, there's a lot of trends, and like Corey said, a lot of people that you thought were going to be gone for quite a while are coming back into our communities, and with my other numbers, are committing new felonies and coming in on our charges, not Department of Corrections. So.
Our other ace in the hole is that our detention center's paid for. What we have is the overhead of staff, the overhead of upkeep, but we're not paying a big bill for mortgage, loan, that kind of thing. It doesn't solve the problem, but it is an ace in the hole for us.
So I guess my observation is basically in alignment with what Wynn and Brandon are saying is you should not have an expectation next year that you're going to have the same, as high a number of paying inmates from outside as we've had last year, the year before, even this current year, which is down from last year. It's just, those are numbers that you cannot, I think, have a great amount of confidence in. So I think safe bet is be at a lower number. And then obviously if the number's higher, that's fine, and that's additional revenue.
So is the trend gonna be that the Department of Corrections is not gonna have anybody here, but we're gonna end up with more because they're turning a bunch loose? Now we're catching them. So how long do they end up staying? When we get them in here and they're our prisoner, how long do we end up keeping them on the average at our dime?
And that depends on the courts and Corey's office on what, I think that we have a duty to the public to protect them, and if there's a person that's on probation, say a violent offender or sex offender, and they're out committing new felony crimes, and we say we charge them, they go in, I don't think it does anybody any favors to get them back out in the community for us. They're obviously showed they can't be out in the community. So they could be in there for several months before their bond is reduced or they or released by our judges. Some a lot sooner if it's a, you know, a smaller, maybe felony crime. The other thing that we're not seeing with the Department of Corrections is they're not putting their own inmates in on their violations. They've definitely lowered the standard of, and I know you guys have heard that from the sheriff a lot, of what, they've lowered the standard of what is acceptable behavior. And they're just not out doing their job, and how can they with, you know, upwards to 100 people on their caseload, and manage them effectively and make sure that they're not out, you know, doing drugs, consuming alcohol, committing new felonies, or even just misdemeanor crimes, and they're not throwing them in jail for it. So it's used to see a lot of 72-hour holds from probation officers. Now you see, it's very rarely that you see that. They have to have done something, a fairly significant violation for them to do that, or they just come in on a new charge, which we see all the time. I mean, the sheriff, you know, a couple weeks ago was driving back from Helena and had a person pass him at a high rate of speed. He stopped him. Person on probation that has new charges from us. I think they were just misdemeanor charges for his driving behavior, habitual offender, driving revoked, no insurance, and I don't know if he had. Do you recall that one? If he had some drug paraphernalia or something on him. It was a new felony drug charge that he received from us. So
Yeah.
it was a new drug felony possession of dangerous drugs. And this is a conditional release inmate that hasn't been out for very long. So I have a pretty good idea of what the Department of Corrections is looking at. Their goal is absolutely to remain at that 250 inmates in county jails. On the other side of that, you know, some of those sheriffs that didn't want Department of Correction inmates in their jails had this huge release like we did in December, and when we're calling for inmates, they're going, well, we're down to maybe 40 and we need that revenue too. But it's opened up a big enough gap that they can actually start arresting people who violate the law in their counties now. Cascade County wouldn't even arrest you on a felony charge if it was under $5,000 bond. Go see the judge. Well, there's a reason why they don't have a warrant, because they have an issue with finding their way to the judge's office. So it's, you know, we're arguing of where's public safety at with Department of Corrections. They think that they're doing public safety, and we're saying, no, you're not. We're trying to do public safety. So the state's in a tough spot right now, and the county attorney had stated with the policy changes.
So many of the decisions that the legislature made on this has made us adversarial, state versus counties. And I don't know what it's gonna end up looking like. But for DOC, I think everything you said is exactly right on. They are going to be fined, and it's a hefty fine. I think it's upwards of $1 million if they don't remain under that 250. Well, from our perspective, we're looking at that saying, you know, we don't really care what the number is. If this person's dangerous, we want him off the street because of public safety. DOC and the legislature is saying, well, we certainly can't have more than 250 people in this state that need to be in jail, so therefore everybody else gets out. That's what we're looking at is I think, some pretty nonsensical decision making.
I think the other thing that'll give you a pretty good idea of where the state's going with, and I'm not sure if this grant came through Department of Board of Crime Control or not. I thought it did, the housing of
It
released
was
felony offenders.
imposed on the Board of Crime Control by the legislature.
Okay.
Another example of what I was just saying.
So I think to give everybody their mind wrapped around it, there was a grant, I think it was at $400,000. It's not a lot, but $400,000 to house convicted felons once they get out of prison, to provide them with free housing, to try to get them back on their feet. So I think it's a big change in the state of Montana that they're trying something different. hoping for a better outcome than what's been going on, but I just don't see it, so they wanna pay for housing, but not jails, so it's, well, I know a lot of sheriffs oppose that, and, one actually, was awarded the grant, once they realized what exactly was for, there was some communication gaps, said, no, we don't want nothing to do with that, our community will not be happy with us bringing, convicted sexual and violent offenders here and then paying for their housing, so. Not good.
And then on top of that, the other cuts by the legislature hit every facet of people's lives. So, yeah, we're talking public safety, but we're also talking about so many of the other responsibilities out there. So it's, all counties are talking about this. The one thing I would say it's doing is bringing sheriffs, county attorneys, and commissioners together in a way that I don't think has been seen for a really long time. So
Yeah.
that's the positive. We all realize we're in this together, and so team building is happening. But, yeah, it's not good. It's not good at all. But I
So
think
the-
Dave's idea of a strategic planning session is a good one.
And the sheriff's at training, right now, but I can, start heading that up and, until he gets back and maybe have something set up soon. So I think, I'm just a little concerned about this, budget process this year and how that's gonna affect the sheriff's office alone, without that revenue, so.
Yeah.
Can you give us a high-level thumbnail sketch of how you see this budget coming together? And
Yeah.
give
We
what
made
you
a
know
number
about
of
it.
decisions last week, but basically what we have to do is focus on reserves this year. Last year, we took all the reserves from the general fund, which is county attorney, justice of the peace, commissioners, accounting, treasurer, recorder, sanitarian, public health, maintenance. And what we did is we took the reserves and we gave it to public safety. In order to balance out the budget, then we borrowed from all the other funds. So, airport, senior services, search and rescue, library, museum, extension. Those ones we took all of their reserves above 14%. And we also shifted those over to essentially public safety. What happened is with the 2-year certification of values, we ended up increasing by such a high percentage that there's legislation that says counties can only grow by 0.5%. So what they did is those valuations stayed up here, but we dipped by 5.19 mils. So we lost those mils. Instead of taking them from public safety, we took them from those other funds in general fund. So this year, we have literally no money. I had suggested we cut all budgets 5% of the general fund last year. Mike had compromised and said, no, let's cut 10% but do it throughout the year rather than at the front end of the budget. Unfortunately, we have not had any teeth or used our teeth, and one department saved their 10%. So we're going into July with zero money in the general fund for operations past July 1. So our focus this year has to be on rebuilding those reserves. We've put together what we expect our growth to be this year, and at a conservative level, we think it'll be 5%. So that 5% is going to go into the reserves. We did get PILT this year. We're going to match with PILT and put that into the reserves. We're going to reinstate the mills if we get any more mills. Those will go into the reserves. So we're going to re-solidify those. We're going to have to address some of the unrealized revenue. So if a department head said, I expect to get $2,000 for whatever, if they didn't, we're going to have to address that. Because what we have are some department heads who just haven't been pulling their weight by working to bring in revenue. I'm not talking about public safety, I'm talking about the general fund. So we've got some work to do on the general fund. We've got to put a focus on those reserves in those funds. The other thing we did at the, with the budget last year is we made a promise to those other departments, again, extension, senior services, search and rescue, that we would make them whole again. We may have to do that over 2 years, but for sure they're gonna have to have an infill to make up for the money we borrowed last year. So those are the number one focuses. I can go through the whole list for you if you want, but that's the foundation that we set last meeting. That makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And we're waiting to talk with the sheriff and the undersheriff in a working meeting. All other departments are frozen with a 2% cut at this point. It's not because we are hurting, it's because we really do need to concentrate on making sure we solidify those reserves.
I'm not quite sure I understand frozen with a 2% cut. Sounds like we just want to do a 2% cut.
Right, yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
And then what about salary increases and how do you see handling that?
CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, which is the foundation for COLA, that's at 2.1 this year. So we're gonna have a county compensation board meeting on Wednesday, and I think we need to start at 2.1, 2.5%. With the 2% cut, there's plenty of money in the budgets for the salaries, and that should result in frozen budgets.
So when you say 2% cut, are you envisioning a 2% cut to the total of the department's budget or the operation and maintenance side of the budget? Because they have the salaries and they'll go up by the 2.1%, so.
Correct. So commissioner's budget, for example, give you a quick, okay, so commissioner's budget, the total is $189,388. That includes everything. So if you take off 2% cut off the whole thing, you come up with cuts of $3,788. Just doing a preliminary, we're gonna do this together next week. I went through the numbers and came up with almost $4,700 that I think we can cut just from our budget. So it's all upwards of the 2%. If you implement a 2.5% COLA, you're increasing that by $321. So does that help put it in perspective? The COLA's minuscule. Cutting 2%, almost anybody can come up with a 2% cut. So we're still cutting, but we're not doing it on the backs of our employees. The problem is years ago, Val and Doug, Val Hornsfeld and Doug Ellis came to us, and they showed us documentation that Broadwater County was in the bottom 10% in the state for salaries. Well, at the time, we were having a really hard time recruiting good people. Now we've been starting to bring those up through the years. We have to do that so that we can continue recruiting qualified people. So, yeah, not having any kind of a COLA this year, not a smart move management-wise, not a smart move budget-wise, especially when you look at an increase of $321. That's pretty small. Any questions on that?
No?
And I can give you that so you have something to look at, Dave. I'd be happy to send it to you.
I understand the concept, but
Okay. Yeah.
I have a question, so is the 2% cut coming before or after the COLA is calculated in? Because,
Before.
so then, because otherwise you'd basically you'd have to cut well over 2% for, if the COLA comes in, for you to still be as a net 2% reduction. So you're asking for a 2% reduction just as a whole, which for us, budget or salaries is the biggest part of my budget. And then if you go ahead and do a 2.5% increase, which by the way, compensation board should probably have a say on this before you guys have already made your decision, then mine would be an overall increase, most likely.
No, it wouldn't. You'd still be down. So, and these are just quick numbers, but, so your 2% to cut, and this is keeping in mind, all department heads in the general fund were instructed to save 10%. Most of them didn't. So we should be starting at a lower point than we're starting. But for your budget, if you cut 2%, you're looking at a cut of $3,876 from your entire budget. If you have a 2.5% COLA, you're looking at an increase of, said $375,000, that's not right. So I hit a wrong button somewhere. But you're looking at $3,700. So you're still cutting almost $200. It's not a lot.
Well, but that doesn't, you're cutting 3,200. When you add the salary increase onto that, you're really having to cut the total of the two, because you have
Correct.
to, because you're not, there's not revenue to make up the difference, so really the cut's double then. I mean,
You could look at it that way, and that's fine.
It's about
The
7,000.
idea is, number one, we're not broke, we're not in dire straits. What we did is we were all reeling last spring. This commission wanted to do everything we could for public safety, and we did. And we did it knowing full well that by saving that 10% was the only way that we were gonna be okay come this time of year. People didn't do it. We didn't sink any teeth, we didn't use sticks, we're using a carrot this year. That's on us. So what we're looking at now is, okay, so how do we rebuild those reserves? We know it's gonna take us more than 1 year to do it. Okay, we're gonna put together a plan. I think it's a sound plan, but the thing is it's not the employees that spent the reserves, it's the department heads and the elected officials. Should the employees then be bearing the brunt of those folks, us folks' management of the budget? I think it's easy to argue no. You cannot ditch your employees. They're the ones that get the work done. They're the ones that provide the customer service. They're the ones that plow the roads and address the flooding and get out at 4 o'clock in the morning to plow snow for the school buses. You can't ditch your employees. This plan is putting a small amount of responsibility on department heads and elected officials to manage their budgets, but it's also making sure that the employees understand and they're not getting ditched. They're being appreciated for the work they did last year. They're all being asked to do more with less. It's a philosophy. And, you know, my philosophy is if you treat your employees well, they will do right by the county and the citizens.
Now,
So-
are you considering the differences between the different kinds of departments, where some departments have a high overhead in operation, maintenance, fuel, all that, and where their salary budget may only be 40% of their budget versus a department that has, where a salary budget is 80% of their budget?
Mhm.
Because when you calculate the salary increase, it also increases overtime, fringe benefits, and all of that other stuff, so it's,
Right, but do you ditch your employees because management didn't do their job?
no, I don't think.
But that's
don't think
not
so.
accurate. You can't
It
say
is.
management didn't do their job. When we give you a proposed budget, we say, here are my responsibilities for the year, here's the money that I think it takes to do that. And that goes for any department. So this idea that we're out there just, frittering away buckets of cash somewhere isn't accurate. If you want a 10% reduction, then go ahead and just cut our budget by 10% and then tell us which of those things that are part of our job that you expect us to not do. Because that's the reality. Whether it's
Corey?
me or anyone else, we have things we have to statutorily do. And
You-
we've said that this is the amount of money we need to do it.
You're correct from your perspective.
Well, good.
We have had
That's all I'm
Harold
trying to
Blatty, if you would let me speak. We've had Harold Blatty come here 3 times to do budget training specifically for you, to help you understand how this works. We have a finite amount of money. That's all we have. Right now, we have a well-diversified county. We don't have all strength in one area. We do a little bit, but we have to fix that. We have a well-diversified county. The example that was used at the last budget training was, if you guys are going to continue keeping your eye on just one department and not realizing you have a finite budget, you're going to end up cutting some services. What was suggested was extension, senior services, the museum, the library, and something else. I can't remember what it was. I'm not going there. as a commission. I am not cutting extension, period. So that's what we have to look at. Yes, you come to us with a budget proposal. It is not, this is what I must have. It's, this is what I want. We look at the full budget and the full amount of money we have, and we have to look at everybody's wants and needs, not just that of one particular person. We instructed everyone to cut by 10%. That was the responsibility of those department heads. It's the responsibility now of the commission to sink our teeth in with a stick or offer a cure, which is what we agreed to do last week. We're going to do the 2% cut instead of insisting on the 10%, and put the extra value, put PILT, put value, PILT, and any additional mills into those reserves. And that is so that we don't have to go to our department heads now and say, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, we're gonna now slash you 10%.
Okay, my
So,
problem is.
we're trying to be fair to everyone, we're trying to work with everyone, but we cannot have a focus that isn't all-encompassing of the county. I expect Brandon to be thinking about public safety and search and rescue. I expect you to be thinking about the county attorney. We three have got to think about the entire county. We can't just give you guys everything you want and not have anything left over for the other essential services that we're responsible for. And this year, I hope that moving forward through the budget, we can do that as a team, because we don't want to ditch you guys, but at the same time, we can't ditch extension, senior services, all the others.
Okay, so my problem I have with your statement a few minutes ago is you said if the department heads, and you didn't specify anybody, so I'm assuming you're talking about everybody, if the department heads don't do their job in cutting their budgets, then we shouldn't blame the employees. So first of all, without anything further in your statement, you're basically saying that all the department heads in this county haven't done their job in cutting their budgets below what we told you last year that we needed in order to do our jobs. I have a problem with that statement. I think it's inaccurate. I think it's doing a scattershot, blame everybody, like we're a bunch of irresponsible people when it comes to managing our budgets. Secondly, what now I understand you're saying is you're gonna balance out everybody else because you think that me and apparently Sheriff's Office cut off that hog last year and got more money than we needed or whatever to do our job. And all I'm telling you is that first of all, if you want this to be a team approach, as you just said, that's great. It sounds to me like you've already made the decisions on how you're gonna do this budget, haven't had a county compensation board, haven't got a preliminary budget request from anybody. You guys have already decided you're gonna do 2.5 COLA, you're gonna do last year's budget minus 2%. Okay, then let's just do that and we'll save everybody a lot of time. But the reality is that we are up against some difficulties. We're up against some statutory requirements. We're up against some legal obligations that we all have to fulfill. And a lot of those are outside of our control. And I'm asking simply for a little bit of allowance for the fact that department heads, whether it's me, whether it's a sheriff, whether it's anybody else, we are doing our very best to be responsible stewards of the public's money. And I don't appreciate a statement that we didn't do our jobs as department heads in cutting our budgets below to whatever number was requested. Because the reality is, I did make sacrifices to come under this year's budget, despite the fact that I didn't think I was going to be able to do that. I made some difficult choices in the last few months in order to where now I'm probably gonna be at 10% savings. And if it hadn't been for this last trial that settled, I wouldn't have made my budget on a few things. Because I had an expert witness I had to hire, and the state no longer pays for expert witnesses like they used to. So I was trying to find money to pay for this expert witness, and then suddenly the trial settled at the last minute. So, not really something that I can plan for a year in advance when we have a very difficult case that's likely to go to trial. I have other cases. I have 2 other cases where I now have to hire expert witnesses, and they'll be in next year's budget, because they'll be after July 1 for their trial. And so I have to plan those, and I have to tell you, hey, I need this witness for this thing. Now, if they settle the day before, when the jury's already packing up, that's something I can do my best to foresee, but I certainly can't foresee it.
I also have at least 2 cases where the defense is seeking a change of venue to a different county. And this isn't the Barris case, I'm talking other cases. And so those expenses, if the judge grants that, I have additional expenses and Val has additional expenses, Sheriff's Office probably has additional expenses. I can't control or negate those if the judge rules against us. And yet if I come in and I say, hey, I need money for this, what I don't want to hear back toward me or the sheriff or anybody else is, well, you didn't do your job. No, I have an obligation to take this person to trial, and if the judge says we're gonna do it in Gallatin County, and that suddenly doubles my costs, that's something that I simply have to try and do my best to get through. So that's my concern. My concern is that we seem to be starting off with what I see as disparaging remarks. Initially, I thought against everybody, now it's clearly against me and the sheriff's office. And I'm concerned that when you say you want a team way of making this budget happen, I'm picking up that either we gotta change how we're doing things to be on your team, where there really isn't a team atmosphere. And I would ask that there be a team atmosphere, and you listen to fellow elected officials and department heads, and not make the decisions already as of April 23rd, when we haven't even started the process.
Okay, Corey, thank you for that. I do speak in generalities, and I'm gonna continue to speak in generalities. I did mention you guys because you guys are here. Brandon, we did give an awful lot to public safety last year. Again, we were reeling as well. Corey, we did ask you to cut 10% last year through the year, and you had an obligation to do that. You didn't. Now, not gonna point any fingers, I am gonna speak in generalities. I'm sorry that it's gotten us off on the wrong foot, but the thing is we've been on the wrong foot now for a couple of years. The bottom line is, we don't have extra money. We don't have it. We understand your plights, both of you. The thing is, in order to give you more money, or for you to always get the yes that you come in here asking for, and it's mostly you, Corey, that come in with the big asks. You guys have been doing actually a really good job with what you've been dealing with. We are faced with taking it away from somebody else, be it 4-H, be it the library, be it search and rescue. We don't have it. We don't have a money tree. We have a finite amount of money. The legislature caps what we can grow at unless it's new growth, and then we actually have that to help with the budget. This is not our first budget meeting. We've had 2 so far, and we did go through and line item by line item went through the goals of how we're going to work on the budget this year. It's not as of today. This is not a shoot from the hip. These were 2-1 votes or 3-0 votes of the full commission. And I think, you know, I'm sorry that there's feelings that are hurt. This is not personal, but we as a commission have got to look at the full county and the full reality that we're looking at. And I understand that that isn't always what everybody wants to hear, but it is the reality of the
To
situation.
take this back to your agenda item of budget plan, could I ask that you, with the departments, also ask them to provide you with a bullet list? And the bullet list, when I say that, means it's one sentence and it goes to the end of the paper and maybe halfway back, prioritized of the things that their budget won't be able to do, or things that they are faced with that they won't be able to deal with. So you have that information in writing in front of you, and then the rest of us can also look at that.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
But ask them to prioritize. And tell them that one piece of paper. Don't come with more than one piece of paper.
Not a book.
No.
Brandon, do you have any idea where the union negotiations are gonna head to?
They're probably focusing on market wage adjustments.
So I think Wynn the other day mentioned 40,000.
That's just for dispatch. If we do what has been done in the county to get people up to market wage adjustments, just dispatch alone is gonna be an increase of about 40,000. That's not counting deputies or detention. And that's part of the reason what, kinda holding off on freezing our budgets, but on the other hand, just looking at, to maintain where we're even at right now with, and I'm doing an estimated, cut of revenue from our office and where that money's gonna come from is roughly 500,000, so, I'm here looking for help, from the commission. It keeps getting told that we, got a huge increase last year. That wasn't all Broadwater County tax dollars. We do appreciate what you guys have done, with the Mason Moore Foundation, or the Mason Moore account for us, and what little increase we did get. The other increase was in the jail revenue and other revenues, that we're not gonna meet this year. So, you know, it looks like it on paper, but the fact is that once that jail cut came in December, we're gonna be short. And, it does make it personal for me, because I have 31 employees, the sheriff has 32 employees, that, what's gonna happen with a $400,000 or $500,000 cut? You know, that does make it personable, and I'm looking for help, and we have gotta figure it out. I feel like, over the years, the jail revenue's gone up, and, we've either maintained or gone down on county tax dollars. I feel like it shouldn't have been managed like that. We should have kept it the same, for when this day comes again, and we didn't learn our lesson. And I say we, as a sheriff's office and the commission, the county in whole did not learn our lesson when we knew Gallatin County was building a jail. One day comes and they pick up every single inmate that's in that jail, and we almost had to shut it down. Here we are again. We're not gonna get $1 million in revenue like we did 16, 17. We're probably not gonna hit that mark of the 800. I can't remember, 835.
43, yeah.
Somewhere $800,000 of revenue this year. It's gonna be really close, probably, most likely a little under. So what happens? You know, that's what Corey's talking about, and I agree with things, that are absolutely outside of our control. One incident, I can give you many, we could sit here all day, is a recent case. The Montana State Crime Lab is absolutely 1.5 to 2 years out for DNA. So the sheriff has to go through a different company at the tune of $3,800, so this guy can't continue to walk out on our streets and to keep our public safe and a certain youth safe, to get a DNA test to link him to the case. Now he sits in our jail, awaiting trial. So it's, you know, that's a huge expense, that we continue to see over and over and over and over. I mean, we've talked about the insurance deductibles for our department, you know, to the tune of $2,500 every time we whack a deer. We put 230,000 miles on a year in this county. It's bound to happen. We've never budgeted for just even that deductible. So when it comes to saving 10% on the sheriff's office side,
You guys weren't asked to.
well, I don't think if we weren't asked to, I think last year would we turn in it was about 5%, I think we had left over of our budget. I think it was obviously a goal to save as much as we can at the sheriff's office, but we are not. We're gonna be maxed out, if not over budget, because of things that we cannot control that have to be done to protect people and that are statutorily required. So I think we gotta sit down and absolutely have some serious conversations of what's gonna happen with public safety in Broadwater County, because the jail is not gonna pay for it anymore.
I have a question. Do you average Broadwater's wages with Lewis and Clark and Gallatin, or do you use like Tool, Pondere, Sheridan, some of those? Are we elevated because we are where we are, or are we on an average where counties of similar population and similar land area are?
I believe that we try to maintain with that same, bracket that we're actually in versus trying to compare to neighboring counties. Cause there's no way that we can fund Lewis, Clark, and Gallatin County. There's no
I
way.
totally agree, but I just was curious.
Can I believe Debbie should have that wage analysis, and I believe it does have the counties that were down on top, doesn't it say there was, I think, 17 counties or something that was, does that ring a bell? I feel like I've seen that, what actual counties they are,
Okay.
so, on there.
Because there isn't any way we can compete with Gallatin, Lewis and Clark and maintain any money in the budget, I wouldn't think.
You're right.
And on that, a little further on the wage, because I look at it all the time, is there's a minimum and then there's a maximum. And I believe it was the commission's goal to get everybody up to the market wage minimum. Which is now 2 years, was that 3 years ago that was done?
2 years
Oh.
ago, yeah, when Nick was here. Yeah.
And if Debbie can't get you copies, I have them at the sheriff's office as well, so.
Thanks.
And the last time we raised the control officers, we did it illegal to the union contract. We went in with an active contract, and that was again Nick's request, and we granted it because we couldn't even compete with McDonald's to get people to come and work for us. And we raised it, I think, from 12 to 14.
It's at starting wage is at
1403.
1403, which you're back to competing with, that was 3 or 4 years ago now again,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute challenge for us to hire people, especially, and keep them once they get into that dispatch center. And your phone rings 18,000 times a year, so it's absolutely,
So those guys being essentially frozen are coming in far below market now after 3 years with this contract. So that's why we're gonna have to look at increasing it for that. But what you run into, if you do start keeping your wages down, is you need to hire somebody qualified for a particular position and you have a vacancy. Well, you can't bring in a new employee dollars more than the person who just left you, who was with you for 20 years. You also can't advertise and get somebody qualified if your rate is too low, because right now we have, 2.1% unemployment? So it's becoming a job seeker's market, and it becomes harder on us. If our wages are so bad, we cannot recruit. So that's one of the reasons we need to be looking at the CPIs and COLAs, is for recruitment and retention purposes, which you retain good employees, you save money. So that's gotta be a focus. But I do think in looking at the past, there's never been enough money to meet everybody's budget requests. But I would be hard pressed to see an example where we have been unfair or ditched a particular department from money they needed to perform their job. I don't think there's any examples of that whatsoever. So that's the goal this year, but we really do have to make sure we get those reserves up, or we're gonna be in a world of hurt. And addressing it now rather than when the train wrecks, is probably a whole lot wiser on our parts. That's what we have to do, in my opinion.
You guys budget, you budget for all your medicals? You
Yeah.
try to? How
We
close
try
are
to.
you most of the time?
Usually, over, I think, I don't know, I wish I would've brought it in here, I think we're over, this year, and that's, I gave that example last, commission meeting, I believe it was, with we had one that's, a gentleman broke his leg about 4 hours before he was arrested, and because he was in our care, we had to pay a $10,000 ankle bill.
Do you want
So-
mine, Brandon?
For medical, for revenue from the state, I think we're over that expected revenue for DOC's inmates.
Does DOC, do they cover all of theirs?
Yes, the only thing that we've been doing to try to keep to stay on DOC's good side as much as we can, which is probably something we're gonna have to look at, and how much are we gonna lose, is we transport their inmates to their medical appointments in Helena for free, because we're trying to keep them shuffling down their prisoners and keep them here. And we're kind of wondering, you know, at what point does it not become cost effective for them to send them here, so. And we've been going and getting their prisoners to bring them here, to keep them, to house them, and not billing them for those miles or that officer's time. Like I said, just to try to keep them, hey, we're working with you, work with us, and, well, now we're finding that, while they kept a few inmates here, they're not willing to bring them from all over the state to our jail, just the ones locally, so around, close to this area. So medical and psychological for the care and custody of prisoners is $15,000 over. And you know, that goes back to what legislation has passed, and I know they had hospitals in their ears on the other side, and some probably pretty good lobbyists, you know, telling them what should happen there, because sheriff's offices would arrest somebody, you know, they'd be in a car crash or a fight, they have to be medically cleared before they go to jail, or they would be assaulted, or maybe be on both sides of a victim and a suspect. And once we go to the hospital and they are in your custody for even the briefest moment, whether to write them a citation, you are responsible for that hospital bill as the county. And that happens a lot. So that is not all of that. That's if a local inmate falls in our jail, has any medical issues while they're inside of our jail, we're responsible for that. The thing that kills us is our insurance so where it's affordable is a $10,000 deductible through MACO, and that just absolutely kills us. And I don't think we've done one insurance claim, because it's just
It's $10,000 deductible per prisoner, not,
per prisoner, per incident. I mean, it's almost not even worth having, but that's what we can afford.
It is worth having, because
Well,
there's been,
yeah, huge incidents.
yeah.
Like the ankle was $10,100. I mean, we got $100 out of it, you know, and then our rates probably would have shot up, you know, for next year. So do you throw that in there, or do you just pay it? You know, we paid it.
There's been a lot of examples before that was started of heart issues.
Yes, we've had a
Open
few
heart
emergencies.
surgery, and it
Yeah.
it was more than the county could handle, and it almost broke Yellowstone County, which is
Yeah.
a huge budget. But before Medicaid expansion, this was even worse. That saved about $86,000 getting Medicaid expansion. So that's also a risk, which could mean a higher cost for us. So that's the other thing is when we look at the budget, Mike, we can't just look at this year. We've got to be looking at the long view as well. That's one of the reasons that, you know, we have to continue to be involved with MACO, the legislature, partners, other counties, other county commissioners, associations.
So Corey, what do you have for things that unforeseen? Your change of venue is a big one. What else do you get? Witness fees?
Yeah, right now I have 2 cases that are sex cases where I'd have to have an outside expert witness. Obviously, who knows how many, we file about 5 a year of those, so who knows how many more we'll get. The Barris case is, we're getting close to where probably another month I can give you an update on that. But it's certainly not gonna be over anytime soon. And then there are a couple change of venue cases. I mean, I think that the problem with those is that the ones in particular is the venue would have to change pretty far, because we wouldn't be able to go to Bozeman or Helen, it would have to go to like Great Falls or Missoula, something like that, because of the way that you look at there, you look at media markets, TV news, et cetera. Those 3 counties, our 3 counties would all be affected, so maybe Butte, I guess, it could Butte or Great Falls possibly. So those things, the problem with those is you don't know if the judge is gonna do it or not, and they usually will make that decision about 3 months before trial, so. There are other ways to do it, or you get a jury from that other county and then you bust them in, you know, but then that's pretty expensive, because you gotta provide a hotel for them and all that, so. I don't know, it's a goofy deal. My point isn't that I can even predict that all those are gonna happen. The point is that they certainly could happen, and if I'm gonna go to trial on one of those, I have to be able to respond. I'm not saying we just have this big bank account somewhere where we stick all that money for something that may happen. But the point is that there's times when those things do happen, you have to pay for them, and they're not something you can just, the only way you can avoid that is if you either dismiss or settle a case on a really bad basis, and that's not something we should be doing. But certainly we try to settle every case if possible.
Mike, when, Brandon, I think you were the one that discovered the horses that needed rescuing.
Mhm.
What we've done in the past is we've reserved a chunk of PILT we've tried to use it on capital expenditures and unforeseen expenses. When those horses were discovered and that whole process started that took 2 years, what we did is we were able to use PILT to actually fund the care for those horses and then some of the different ancillary costs that went with that. That is how we've been using PILT. It's been a responsible way to use it. That would be a good way to continue to use PILT. But we have to make sure we have a solid foundation in order to continue that. But that would address some of what Corey's looking for if there is something that hits like a change of venue. Then you would hope that you have your foundation solidified, you have a chunk of PILT, still with the label over it for unforeseen circumstances, and use that for something like that.
Are you getting your PILT money, I know you got it for 1 year, are you getting it for 2?
Mm-mm. No, we generally find out in September when we're building the budget. This year we didn't find out till about 3 weeks ago.
I wasn't sure if the omnibus bill covered 2 years or 1.
Just one. It covered 2 years as SRS, Secure Rural Schools. So we got that retro for last year and this year. Yeah.
So the pill was for basically the end of the year we're coming to.
No, this coming fiscal year. So we knew we had the PILT money coming in June this year. Now we know we have it coming in June of next year.
Okay.
And that's where I can again say, we've never left a department head high and dry on a request because of responsible budgeting and having that reserve of PILT. But if we cannot get a handle on these reserves, we will not be able to hold that chunk of PILT back, which means there will be no fund for unforeseen circumstances. All this year is going back to the reserves. We've gotta get our foundation solidified, and we are not gonna get that done if we're at each other's throats.
And I don't have a problem sharing the pain, and I'm happy to do that, and I feel like I've done that as well to this point. What I don't like is to get an accusation or insinuation that I haven't done my job in cutting when some of the things that I can't cut, if you cut them, you're into meat and bone. And I'd hate to have a really bad criminal case with violence and victims and all that, and I hate to have to, sell that case out because I couldn't pay for a trial expense. And I would come to you guys in advance to avoid that. So if we can have that kind of a commitment going forward, if it's something that if I can't find another way to do it, then I'm comfortable with that. But I can't do it in a way where, well, you gotta do this, you gotta do that is another painful thing that puts us in a situation where we feel like we can't win or can't do our job. That's my expression of both my duty and the sheriff's duty to you guys.
One of the things that we were advised a couple months ago that we were not going to have is any more money for Meals on Wheels. It's a life-saving program for our seniors. Now, we found out about a week ago at the Agency on Aging meeting that that is solid for this year. We better have an eye on the future, that could be lost, and we're gonna have the ability to pay for something like that. So that's what I'm talking about when I say there's gotta be a balance. Everything's getting cut. We have got to maintain a balance for this county. We cannot stop funding senior services or life-saving services. So how do we maintain that? And that's gonna have to be, in my opinion, a focus of this commission.
I did ask about that community service interlocal. They thought the program was over. That's why I think discussion would really help.
I agree, yeah. I think it's necessary. I think it's overdue. Brandon, I don't know if you were here, we also talked about setting up a strategic meeting regarding the union negotiations. We need to have a plan in place so that we make sure that we don't drag it out longer than it needs to be drug out.
What, is that set up, or do we need to set that up then?
Yeah, if you could, it'd be good with the management team. We talked to Win about it at the last meeting, I know he's traveling, but if you talk to him or start setting something up, that would be another good
I can do that.
meeting to set up, working meeting.
I have a request that's off topic. So I've been able to clear some time tomorrow to work on the solid waste thing. I'm wondering if I can come get a file from one of you or all of you, however, that's got all the documents, and just, I could have Sherry come sometime today and make copies so I can just go through everything. Are you guys around? Is that doable today, or even tomorrow morning's okay? Either way.
We're interviewing tomorrow, so today would be better.
Okay. Well, after lunch then I'll have her come.
I wonder if we shouldn't get a hold of John Hahn and get everything from the board.
Probably a good idea.
He has a copy, you should have a copy of everything.